PMC Wagner's role as a transnational criminal organization. Hearing before the Committee on Foreign Relations, United States Senate, 117th Congress. Opening statement by Trent Toski. Greetings, committee members. It's an honor to be in front of you all today to present my testimony. My name is Trent Toski, and I appreciate you all taking the time to hear me speak and voice my opinion on transnational criminal organizations. I am a former Russo-Ukrainian war volunteer and currently a student at the American Military University. This testify aims to shed light on the urgent need for coordinated international efforts to curb the activities of the private military company PMC Wagner and protect global stability. The following transcript captures a comprehensive overview of the actions, atrocities, and goals of PMC Wagner. It offers valuable insights into the complexities of confronting a sophisticated and covert criminal organization and serves as a crucial resource for policymakers committed to enhancing national and international security through targeted interventions against such entities. Background and creation of the Wagner Group. Private military contracting, more commonly known as mercenary groups, has been involved in the lucrative business of soldiers for hire within the war industry since the inception of warfare. In 2014, a new mercenary group was formed by Yevgeny Prigozhin and Dmitry Utkin. Prigozhin, a longtime friend of Vladimir Putin, initially started out as a hot dog vendor in St. Petersburg, Russia, after a 9-year prison sentence for robbery. Prigozhin eventually found success with his small business and later opened a luxury-style restaurant where many Russian elites, including Putin, would attend dinners. Putin and Prigozhin would soon become close friends, establishing each other as business partners, with Putin allotting numerous governments food catering contracts to Prigozhin. These government contracts enriched both men monetarily and strengthened their continued friendship. Meanwhile, Prigozhin leveraged his newfound connections with the Russian elite to further his business goals and eventual political influence. At the same time, another Russian national with ambitious goals was also gaining political influence, albeit through military status instead of financial wealth. Dmitry Utkin, a former GRU officer and veteran of the Chechen Wars, continued to live a life of war. Utkin, however, was different from most Russian veterans, especially those within the Russian intelligence services. Dmitry held numerous extremist and racist ideologies stemming from Nazi beliefs. Utkin went as far as having the Schutzstaffel SS bolts tattooed on his body and designated his call sign as Wagner, a reference to Richard Wagner, Adolf Hitler's favorite composer and a known anti-Semite. After Utkin's time serving under the Russian Federation, he decided in 2013 to join the Slavonic Corps PMC. After a disastrous mission in Syria, where a large portion of the mercenaries were killed in action, Utkin took it upon himself to capture this new political vacuum and reorganize the remaining mercenaries from the Slavonic Corps to join his newly formed PMC, officially known as PMC Wagner, or commonly known as the Wagner Group. Dmitry's new PMC consisted primarily of veterans of the Russian army, but there was one drastic problem for the organization in general. All armies and militant groups need constant monetary backing and logistical coordination in order to maintain and fulfill military purposes. It is not confirmed, but it is more than likely that the Putin administration connected the previously mentioned Yevgeny Prigozhin and Dmitry Utkin to work together and establish PMC Wagner as a legitimate mercenary group. Dmitry would be the military and operational commander of Wagner, while Yevgeny's role would be to provide financial support and political backing whenever necessary. Putin's most likely supported this decision due to his plans to annex Crimea in the coming months. The plausible deniability afforded by PMC Wagner allows the Russian government to use military force to further Russian interests in situations that were not feasible before. It would not take long for the Wagner Group to see action being deployed in 2014 to act alongside the Russian armed forces during the almost bloodless takeover of Crimea and Ukraine. Since then, Wagner has constantly been increasing in size and scope of operations, operating in the Donbass, Syria, in Central African Republic, Libya, Venezuela, Sudan, Mali, and possibly many more locations. The Wagner Group has proved itself not to just be a one-off event, but a fully fledged mercenary organization willing to work under the Kremlin's banner. Impact of the Wagner Group as a transnational criminal organization. The global impact of the Wagner Group has only been seen as a detriment to the world order. Since its inception, almost all Wagner operations have consisted of undermining political institutions, engaging in illegal resource operations, and acting as a second-hand military under Russian control. Due to them being a PMC, the plausible deniability by the group allows their actions to continue to disrupt the world via inter- and intrastate conflicts. As stated previously, the Wagner Group's first deployment was in Ukraine during the annexation of Crimea in 2014. They would eventually almost operate exclusively in the Donbass for the next decade, for the next few years, supporting pro-Russian separatist movements. However, almost immediately after annexing Crimea, the group sought to expand its business and power internationally. With the emerging civil war in Syria, the Wagner PMC decided to entrench itself in this conflict on behalf of the Russian-backed Assad regime, signing contracts for combat deployments. The Wagner Group, however, did not entirely act as a security force, which would become a trend in their upcoming operations. The group faced international condemnation after a video surfaced of them horrifically torturing, beheading Syrian national Al-Abdullah Bouta, who had defected from the Syrian army after being drafted to fight the Syrian Democratic Forces. A few years later, an American Forward Operating Base, or FOB, operating near the Conoco oil fields near the town of Kasham, spotted an unknown force of about 600 soldiers appearing to operate like a Soviet armored battalion group heading towards them. U.S. intelligence intercepted radio transmissions overhearing communications in Russian, signifying this was a Russian-led force. American intelligence immediately called out to the Kremlin asking if this force was under Russian control. The Kremlin responded with a stern no, signifying that a battle was about to take place. Unfortunately for this unknown battalion, they were swiftly decimated by the American forces, comprising about 40 special operations soldiers. The American Quick Reaction Force, consisting of B-52 bombers, Apaches, mortar systems, and other heavy gunfire, destroyed the unknown force, leaving them combat ineffective while the Americans took no casualties. A radio interception by U.S. intelligence would soon prove that the unknown soldiers were the Wagner Group. This was the first time Russian and United States forces had directly engaged each other in combat for decades. You may ask why the Wagner Group decided to do this? Well, they simply wanted to take control of the U.S.-held oil fields for their profits. PMC Wagner, acting outside of the interests of their hired contractors and instead of for their own monetary gains, set a precedent that the organization is willing to promote political destabilization as long as it benefits their pockets. This attitude and sentiment by the group did not end there. The eventual full-scale invasion of Ukraine on February 24, 2022 proved disastrous for the invading Russian forces. The initial 3-day special military operation was thwarted by the Ukrainian army, supported by Western powers. Due to this initial military failure, the Russian Ministry of Defense engaged in a war of attrition and immediately started deploying Wagner forces almost full-time in Ukraine to support the Russian invasion. However, due to manpower shortages within both the Russian armed forces and Wagner, Yevgeny Prigozhin opted to initiate a new plan detailed with Vladimir Putin. To address the manpower shortage, Wagner would be allowed to recruit from prisons. The contract entailed that any convict who survived 6 months in Ukraine after 1 month of training would be released back to the Russian public. There was no limits on the crimes of the prisoners, meaning that rapists, murderers, thieves, and more would be joining the invasion of Ukraine. Eventually, 50,000 convicts were recruited and sent to Russia's prisons into PMC Wagner. These recruits routinely engaged in horrific war crimes against the AFU, or Armed Forces of Ukraine, with one instance being recorded of a Wagner PMC castrating a Ukrainian soldier. These videos were seen as acts of terrorism by effectively every nation. After the German parliament declared PMC Wagner a terrorist organization, Wagner responded by sending a bloody sledgehammer to the German government. Given that multiple taped Wagner POW executions have circulated showing them being decapitated by sledgehammers, the world understood the meaning of this present. However, with Wagner's rise, political turmoil began to set in between the Russian Ministry of Defense and Wagner forces. Prigozhin soon started publicly defaming and calling out multiple Russian generals and politicians, notably the head of Russian Ministry of Defense, Sergei Shoigu. Prigozhin complained of a lack of ammunition and poor military coordination between the Russian armed forces. After Wagner's eventual capture of Bakhmut, the relationship between Wagner and Russia severely deteriorated. Putin decided to mandate that all PMCs between Wagner and Russia, that all PMCs working with the Russian military would be forced to integrate into the Russian armed forces. This ultimately would destroy the Wagner Group and bring it fully under control of the Russian High Command. Prigozhin, however, would respond to this mandate with both political and violent retaliation. First, he released a video designating the entire invasion of Ukraine as being motivated by false pretenses and attempted to expose the systematic corruption within the Russian army. Prigozhin then commanded Dmitry Utkin to take command of Wagner forces in Ukraine, pull all troops from the Ukrainian front lines, and march to Moscow with plans to attack the Kremlin until the Russian Ministry of Defense minister stepped down, effectively instigating a bloody coup. However, Putin had Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko broker a deal with Prigozhin to stop the attack on Moscow in exchange for Wagner being left alone and their leaders being safe in exile in Belarus. During Wagner's time in Belarus, they prepared for contracts in Africa, leaving Europe for good at this time. However, for unknown official reasons, Prigozhin, accompanied by Utkin, traveled back to Russia, probably assuming he was guaranteed safety under Putin. However, Prigozhin's jet airplane was destroyed, almost likely by a planted bomb, while traveling from Moscow to St. Petersburg, killing all 10 inhabitants, including Prigozhin and Utkin. The death of the original founders of Wagner may seem like the end of the PMC, but reality paints a different picture. Currently, Wagner has continued Prigozhin's plans of a new conquest in Africa. Almost a year since the deaths of the original leaders of Wagner, the power vacuum of who is officially leading Wagner still remains a mystery, but reports state that former top associate of Wagner is starting to assume command, and even Prigozhin's son, Pavel, who already had a large financial holding in the company. We can assume the new leadership within Wagner is hoping to act more quietly than the previous administration and keep a lower profile. This, however, does not mean their actions have improved by any amount. In countries like the Central African Republic, CAR, Mali, Sudan, and Libya, Wagner currently provides military support and security for those regimes, but their activities also involve controlling and exploiting natural resources such as gold, diamonds, and other minerals. These operations typically involve securing mining sites, engaging in illicit resource extraction, and operations typically involve using violence and intimidation to maintain control. In Sudan, for example, Wagner protects mining interests and has been implicated in smuggling gold out of the country, bypassing official channels and contributing to regional instability. In Libya and CAR, Wagner's involvement includes not only combat and training roles, but also facilitating illegal arms trade and other black market activities. The combination of military support and criminal enterprise enables Wagner to finance its operations independently while extending Russia's geopolitical influence in Africa. Their actions blur the lines between state-sponsored mercenary work and organized crime, highlighting their role in destabilizing regions for profit and strategic gain. Looking back on the activities of the Wagner Group from its beginning to the present day, the Wagner's evolution from a shadowy mercenary outfit to a transnational criminal organization is staggering. Operating with impunity under the guise of plausible deniability, the Wagner Group has systematically undermined political institutions, engaged in illegal resource exploitation, and orchestrated military interventions to further its own interests. From Ukraine to Syria and beyond, their track record is one of violence, terror, and brazen profiteering at the expense of stability of human lives. The events recounted, from the brutal acts in Syria to the direct confrontation with U.S. forces, underscore the group's willingness to sow chaos and direct confrontation and bloodshed wherever it serves their bottom line. Even as their founders met their demise, the Wagner Group's nefarious activities persist, with new leadership emerging to continue their legacy of exploitation and violence, particularly in Africa. With operations in countries like Sudan, Libya, and the Central African Republic, they continue to blur the lines between state-sponsored military action and outright criminality and perpetrating instability of their own gain while extending Russia's geopolitical reach. This testimony serves as a stark warning of the dangers posed by such unaccountable entities whose actions threaten not only of the lives of those directly affected, but the very fabric of global order and security. Current efforts and further recommendations to contain PMC Wagner. The international community has been actively engaged in efforts to degrade PMC Wagner, a Russian the Russian PMC involved in various conflicts around the world. These efforts primarily focus on diplomatic channels, sanctions, and legal actions to curb the company's activities and influence. Countries and international organizations have implemented targeted sanctions against individuals and entities associated with PMC Wagner, aiming to restrict their financial resources and mobility. Additionally, diplomatic pressure has been exerted on Russia to increase transparency and accountability regarding the activities of its private military companies. However, due to the complex geopolitical dynamics involved and the clandestine nature of PMC Wagner's operations, effectively degrading its capabilities remains a significant challenge for the international community. Ongoing efforts continue to prioritize monitoring, intelligence gathering, and coordination among stakeholders to address this issue comprehensively. I propose to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee to increase the international community's engagement to degrade PMC Wagner. These efforts should primarily focus on diplomatic channels, sanctions, and legal actions to curb the company's activities and influence. Countries and international organizations have implemented targeted sanctions against individuals and entities associated with PMC Wagner, aiming to restrict their financial resources and mobility. Additionally, the diplomatic pressure has been exerted on Russia to increase transparency and accountability regarding the activities of its private military companies. However, due to the complex geopolitical dynamics involved and the clandestine nature of PMC Wagner's operations, effectively degrading its capabilities remains a significant challenge for the international community. Ongoing efforts continue to prioritize monitoring, intelligence gathering, and coordination among stakeholders to address it comprehensively. In addition to economic and legal measures, it is crucial to emphasize the importance of strategic communication and public diplomacy in countering the influence of PMC Wagner. This entails effectively communicating the risks and consequences associated with engaging in PMC Wagner's services to both state and non-state actors. Public awareness campaigns can educate populations in conflict-affected regions about the implications of hiring PMC Wagner, including the potential for human rights abuses, exacerbation of conflicts, and infringement on national sovereignty. Simultaneously, efforts should be made to delegitimize PMC Wagner's operations and reputation on the international stage through coordinated messaging and information dissemination. By exposing the negative impacts of PMC Wagner's activities and undermining its credibility, the international community can weaken its influence and deter potential clients from seeking its services. Moreover, fostering partnerships with civil society organizations, media outlets, and other stakeholders can amplify these efforts and generate broader support for curbing the influence of PMC Wagner. Ultimately, integrating strategic communication into this multifaceted approach will enhance the effectiveness of diplomatic, economic, and legal measures in countering PMC Wagner's influence and advancing global security objectives. Conclusion. This testimony provided today underscores the urgent need for a coordinated international response to address the significant threat posed by the Wagner Group. As a transnational criminal organization, Wagner has consistently destabilized regions, undermined political institutions, and committed egregious human rights abuses, all while expanding Russia's geopolitical influence under the guise of plausible deniability. The detailed account of their operations from their inception to their current activities in Africa highlights the complex and covert nature of their engagements and the extensive impact on global stability. It is imperative that the international community intensifies diplomatic efforts, imposes stringent sanctions, and pursue legal actions to curb Wagner's activities. Furthermore, strategic communication and public diplomacy must be leveraged to expose and delegitimize Wagner's operations, ensuring that potential clients and affected populations are aware of the dangers associated with the organization. By adopting a comprehensive and multifaceted approach, we can enhance global security and safeguard the integrity of the international order. I urge the Senate Foreign Relations Committee to lead in fostering these efforts, ensuring a concerted and effective response to counter the malign influence of the Wagner Group. Thank you for your attention and commitment to this critical issue. Thank you again. Take care and goodbye.